Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Just finished up talking about Steve Wilks and the 49ers. Now we're going to be moving on to the Bears' decision with Justin Fields, and more so where from his perspective is the best place for him to end up. So we're going to be evaluating some of these landing spots for him. It's interesting because the way that this has all sort of been talked about as of the past couple weeks, a first-round pick is likely not in the cards for the Bears getting in return for Justin Fields, which I personally think makes sense if you talk about just sort of a little bit of the leverage. It's not that the Bears, that is, are necessarily handicapped in needing to go get a new quarterback, but if their intention clearly is to go get a new quarterback, they can't keep Justin Fields on the roster. So they would have to move on from him. And I think that, Fields is obviously a very interesting prospect as far as a quarterback to bring into your locker room to sort of help give you a fresh start and all of that. But it's not quite that simple as far as drafting him as if he were coming out of college. You have a decision to make on whether or not you are going to pay him the big money. And that sort of decreases the value a little bit because there is a chance that things don't work out. And I think that giving up a first round pick for one of these chances is just a little too much of a gamble, in my opinion. And I think that, Fields is a very good player. And, I haven't been the highest on him throughout his career, but I thought that last year he made real strides in the passing game. Still, the consistency with him is not perfect. And, I think it's figuring out that balance for him of how to use your legs to your advantage. But also, I think to a certain extent, you have to be able to make plays in the passing game as well. We've seen Lamar Jackson be able to develop this over the course of his NFL career, so I definitely don't think it's an impossibility that Justin Fields could do a similar thing himself. So, I think that a lot of teams should be interested in Justin Fields. There are a lot of teams that have concerns at the quarterback position, and considering it's probably not going to take a first round pick unless things sort of change here, there are a bunch of teams that should be in on Fields, and I sort of wanted to go through the different options. Also, quickly before we do so, on the Bears side of this, I think it's sort of important to put things into perspective because no, you're maybe not getting a first round pick, but I don't think that should really make you hesitate on the decision of whether or not to move on from him. As a front office and as a coaching staff, I think that your top priority should be making sure the guy you are playing at quarterback can lead you eventually to a Super Bowl. In a perfect world, of course, not every team is a Super Bowl contender, but can you see this guy being a Super Bowl winning quarterback for you? And I know that not all situations are obviously built equal, but when you have the first overall pick, like the Bears do, you are hoping to cash out on the value that you have with that. And I think that for them, that means taking a quarterback, resetting their quarterback contract, and sort of starting over here. And you shouldn't get too hung up on the value of Fields because really it doesn't do much for you as a backup quarterback. And if you look in the past decade, there have been instances of teams moving off of quarterbacks quicker when need be. And I think that really the first one that I can really remember of this happening was the Cardinals deciding to draft Josh Rosen with the 10th pick in 2018, and then after a very rough rookie season, so he he never showed anywhere near the promise of Justin Fields. But the Cardinals moved on from him 1 year later and drafted Kyler Murray when they had the number 1 overall pick. What's interesting is, again, Rosen was never looked to be really the ceiling guy of the caliber of Justin Fields. Rosen was more so seen as the ready now prospect coming into that draft, but they got a second round pick and a fifth round pick in exchange for Rosen there. So a pretty decent return, and this is for a guy who hasn't made a start in the NFL since that following season in 2019, hasn't appeared in an NFL game period since 2021. So Fields is a far and away better quarterback than Rosen ever was, but the point is you can just get value for that guy based off of the position that he plays. And if Fields isn't going to be a part of your future, there's no point in playing hardball or any of that. So, Kyler Murray, that is, has had his highs and lows with the Cardinals, but we knew that Josh Rosen wasn't the quarterback for the Cardinals. Nobody questions their decision to move on from him, especially because they got some value in return. Justin Fields, I'll say it one last time, obviously better than Rosen, but a lot of people are viewing it that it's just not going to work out between him and the Bears, so why prolong this any longer? On that note, moving into some of these landing spots for him, first off, the Pittsburgh Steelers have really been a team that has been getting a lot of buzz in the Justin Fields market as of late. Mike Tomlin has been a fan of him reportedly. It was Adam Schefter, I believe, of ESPN who sort of started adding fuel to the fire with this one, talking about how much of a fan Tomlin is of Fields. And then he was on the Pat McAfee show within the past week, and he said, we know that Pittsburgh is going to go out and get some type of quarterback. Now, what exactly that means, not 100% sure. I mean, it could mean a couple different things. It could mean trying to go get a guy with a ceiling like Justin Fields, or you could go with one of these more experienced guys that have been around the league for a bit, Russell Wilson, Ryan Tannehill, or you could go even lower, keep Kenny Pickett, and also bring in one of these sort of middling guys that are the premier backups, Gardner Minshew, Jacoby Brissett, to sort of push Kenny Pickett a little bit in terms of his job security. Just throwing this out here, Joe Flacco, if he wanted to keep playing football for this season, I think that the Browns are going to have to move off of Flacco because of how much money they owe Deshaun Watson. Flacco wants a job. I mean, him going to the Steelers would be such an intriguing storyline. So just throwing it out there, probably not going to happen. But on the note of Fields to the Steelers, they have the 20th overall pick, which would probably be the ceiling of what the Bears could get in exchange for Fields. Not getting any sort of a high first round pick. I don't think they're getting a first round pick at all. But 20th is at least in the range of if there were any sort of a bidding war for Justin Fields, which we'll see as teams sort of decide how they want to go about finding their next quarterback. The 20th overall pick would sort of trump any other offer that another team could put out there. So, it's a little bit of an interesting decision. 20th is around the pick that they used to select Kenny Pickett with a first rounder in the 2022 draft. But, after building up a lot of excitement, I think, during training camps and preseason, he didn't deliver, Kenny Pickett that is, a spectacular season. And the Steelers' offense was a mess. There was the whole Matt Canada saga, everybody calling for his job, and him eventually being fired partway through the season. You had concerns with the lack of effort and the culture almost between George Pickens and Deontay Johnson, not playing hard, not blocking, not jumping on fumbles, all of that. And Pickett himself dealt with injuries because some less than ideal offensive line play. It was actually when he was out in the Texans game, which might have been his last game. I can't 100% remember, but I think it might have been the season-ending injury. Well, other than the fact that they actually chose to stick with Mason Rudolph down the stretch even when Pickett came back because they were winning with Rudolph, it was off of a play where their rookie tackle, Broderick Jones, got beat and Pickett sort of got rolled up on. So, this is the team, like I mentioned, not my favorite landing spot necessarily. They have some receiver talent. I like their running backs. Najee, good, solid player. I really like Jaylen Warren. I think that he is a great running back. And, overall, the two of those combinations plus the receivers, again, not my favorite spot. Steelers are in a weird position right now. Like, they win regular season games. Tomlin still has a streak of no losing seasons going on, but hasn't won a playoff game since 2016 despite being somewhat in the position. And quarterback has been a little bit of the struggles there as of these last few years. Roethlisberger on his final legs took them to the playoffs and maybe one of the worst playoff teams we have seen in the past decade or so. But, the Steelers could definitely be looking to make a push, and I think that Justin Fields would be an interesting option to at least kick the tires on. The next team I have is the Seattle Seahawks. I yesterday talked about Seattle's decision that is coming up with Geno Smith. We still haven't heard back about that yet, but to quickly sort of summarize that, the Seahawks have an option of whether or not to release Geno Smith by Friday. They save themselves something $12-13 million if they do so by Friday. If not, that money is guaranteed for next year. They can still get out, but it's not quite as easy. So there's speculation. Among that speculation, Mike McDonald hinted to the media about his hopes for Ryan Grubb, their new offensive coordinator, developing a stronger run game, and Geno could be a part of that, but sort of also insinuates that they're not quite looking to be quite as pass heavy in the upcoming season. McDonald, when it comes to run game, McDonald has spent the better part of the last decade with the Ravens, who of course have Lamar Jackson and is the prototypical running quarterback and knows how to incorporate those running aspects from the quarterback position in the run game as a whole. So, I don't know, maybe a little bit of a parallel there. McDonald was hired to a 6-year contract, which means he has the flexibility to sort of help rebuild this thing, which you can interpret a couple different ways, whether or not they want to don't want to rush into this thing, or they probably have a little bit of flexibility to go and gamble on somebody in year one, but that would also include potentially having to pay him big money going forward. So a little bit interesting, not totally sure, but they have the receivers to, surround Justin Fields or whoever's at quarterback with. Lockett, Metcalf, and their rookie from last year, Jackson Smith and Jigba, are all under contract next season. The offensive line's a little bit of a mess, and they also don't have a second round pick to trade for Fields. Second round, one of those day 2 picks, I think second round is probably about the price that the Bears are going to primarily get for Fields. They don't have that because they just traded that for Leonard Williams this past year, but I think Fields would look really cool in a Seahawks jersey, especially those vintage ones, and I think it would be a pretty decent fit. Last team here I have, for today at least, is the Atlanta Falcons. I think this is my favorite destination for Fields. Atlanta has been really held back by their quarterback play the past couple seasons. I think that last year was just a disaster at that quarterback position. It started heading into the year where Arthur Blank talked during the offseason that he had no interest in Lamar Jackson, and whether or not they actually would have been able to get him is one thing, but to not even entertain the idea or force the Ravens' hand is crazy. said that he thought that they had enough in Desmond Ritter and Taylor Heineke. So really not great there. Now Arthur Smith is out as the head coach there. They bring in Raheem Morris as their new head coach. I love the hire. He is defensive minded, but I think that he's a really good culture setter, and he's at least been around Sean McVay for the past couple seasons. That, not saying he would dictate the offense by any means, but maybe he's at least, aware of some of these strategies to build up a good offense. I think that Justin Fields could definitely slide into a similar sort of role there that could benefit in a Shanahan McVay offense. I know it's a lot of quick passes, but to sort of take that with the weapons that they have in Bijan, Tyler Algier, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Jonnu Smith, and sort of operate this quick fire offense where there's a running threat. You have two very good running backs in the backfield. They're probably a wide receiver short, but they are building something here. And they have the number 8 pick in the draft, where there is a little bit of rumors floating around there that the Falcons really like J.J. McCarthy, the Michigan quarterback, which could spoil this idea. I'm not the biggest J.J. McCarthy guy myself, and I would rather see Fields there in Atlanta and use that number 8 pick on one of these elite receivers that are coming out in the draft this season. But I guess we'll just have to continue to see as this moves on. There are, of course, other teams that could potentially take a stab at Justin Fields. I don't think that the Broncos have the money, but they're going to be needing a quarterback likely. Patriots, Raiders. So there are definitely moves to be made for Fields. I expect that he's going to have a market, and I am curious to see how much competition there's going to be in the pursuit of Fields. That is all we have on that for now. We're going to be taking our final break, and when we come back on the other side, we will be talking some NBA and the games that took place last night, so stick with us.